Welcome to the podcast Emotional Intelligence, your greatest asset and key to success. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Palacios, coming to you from the Greater New Haven, Connecticut area. As a positive intelligence or PQ coach, I'm committed to helping people develop both emotional intelligence and mental fitness. You'll come to regard problems as situations that help you learn and grow. PQ is a way of being and doing in the world that enables you to develop and sustain a positive relationship with yourself and others, at home, at work, and everywhere in between. Please subscribe to this podcast and tap the like button so more people can enjoy the benefits of PQ. And now, here's the show. All right. Hello, everybody. And it's been a minute since I've been here. Welcome to the podcast. This is episode 12 on the diversity series. And today we're going to be talking about neurodiversity. And I am blessed to have two wonderful guests who are going to talk a little bit about their experience with neurodiversity. And they both identify as neurodivergent. And we're just going to have a conversation. Since this is broadcast live, you can comment, but I'm not sure I can moderate them, so please be nice so that I don't have to remove anything later. Okay, and thank you again for being here, and thank you, LaMyra and Bob, and I'm just going to do a quick intro to both of you, and then we'll get the show rolling. LaMyra McGee is a trailblazing figure in the field of education. She is a licensed school psychologist in the state of Texas and a nationally certified school psychologist with a profound personal and professional commitment to shifting the narrative of neurodiversity in education. Diagnosed with ADHD and CPTSD, LaMyra's journey has been marked by resilience and a deep understanding of the challenges faced by neurodiverse individuals. Having served in the Army for 16 years, LaMyra brings a unique perspective to her work, combining her military discipline and her compassionate approach to supporting others. And as a parent of multiple neurodiverse children, she intimately understands the dynamics of neurodiversity within the family unit. LaMyra is driven by a mission to ensure that every child, regardless of their neurodiversity or neurotypicality, I might add, receives the support and resources they need to thrive in the educational system. She's dedicated to expanding knowledge on neurodiversity practices in education, advocating for inclusive policies, and bridging the gap in access to information and support for underserved communities. And Bob Palacios boasts a distinguished 2-decade career in the cybersecurity realm, lending his expertise to industry giants like RSA, McAfee, and VeriSign. Leveraging a strong background in technical pre-sales engineering and global leadership roles, Bob made a strategic shift into the coaching arena. He's also a PQ coach like I am. His expertise now lies in holistic performance coaching, leadership development, and organizational team coaching. He is wholeheartedly committed to guiding technical sales, pre-sales, and other professionals in achieving holistic success in their personal and professional lives. In addition, he is a certified information system security professional, and he's also a high-performance coach and certified red team coach. Bob's academic background includes a Bachelor of Arts in Government from the University of Texas at Austin, I think that's Hookham, and pursued graduate studies at both UT Austin and the George Washington University. Welcome to you both, and again, thank you for being here. Both of them are taking time out of their workday to be on this podcast, so again, I appreciate you. I wanted to just start with the term neurodiversity and how it entered our lexicon, because I think that's really interesting that as time shifts, the different ways that people are described or labeled or pigeonholed changes. And when one term goes out of fashion, if you will, because people have realized that it's kind of denigrating or unkind, a new term takes its place. And so neurodiversity is now a new watchword, and it includes so many different things. And I'm kind of wondering, and my friend actually, who was also identifies as neurodivergent, said that he heard that it's kind of like a code word. And I wondered what you guys think about that. If you could just both maybe just answer that in turn.
If you want to start, Bob.
I was gonna defer to you, but I can jump in. That's an interesting concept, I guess, coming most directly from a corporate environment, and the growth of neurodiversity resource groups, depending upon the size of the company. There's been resource groups for many years, but now you're seeing neurodiversity as a resource group.
Hmm.
Um, I think obviously I think that's a great thing, um, but I don't know, I'm conflicted by it because I think it is a very large umbrella, but it also it's great to have people to be able to identify and say I'm not alone.
Hmm.
And so being able to whatever the term is at the moment, I do think it is helpful to have people to be able to relate to that group. And then you can find your subgroups, whether it's ADHD or whatever else within there, but at least have something. I'm not sure I'm hung up on the name, but I'm just happy that it's being recognized and even within a corporate environment. Again, that's where I come from, so I'm going to speak to that. But yeah, I guess that's
No,
my take.
that's actually really helpful because we're talking about all walks of life. So we have someone in corporate America and we have someone in education. So,
Yeah,
LaMyra.
I absolutely agree. When we talk about like just putting a name on something, and I feel like there's pros and cons to it. So there's pros to it because now, like Bob said, you know that you're not alone in this kind of journey and the deficits that people who identify as neurodivergent struggle with. But it can also have its the other end of the coin, I guess, because it's become this like TikTok craze, or
Mm,
it's the it thing. Everybody has this thing, and a lot of people use the term but don't really know what it is, or
mhm,
don't really know, or it's like, oh, we're doing this for neurodiversity, but um, it's just used to say it, and we're not actually backing it up. And so I think these types of conversations are extremely important because it's, I didn't putting a face behind the term, as opposed to it just being, oh, we're neurodiversity and affirming and inclusive and all that stuff. But it's like, but what are you doing?
mhm. Yeah, I want to pick up on
So,
that last point because this reminds me of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging and justice are things that have been missing in a lot of places in a lot of different institutions, and it seems that HR has been sort of tasked with that. But over the years, and particularly since the George Floyd incident, all of a sudden DEI became a really important watchword. And firms were saying, oh, yes, we want DEI, we want DEI. But I feel like that became an empty signifier too, or it became this umbrella term. And what did it really mean? And I've talked before on this, diversity isn't just sort of adding people to the mix and saying, okay, now we're diverse, because that doesn't mean people belong or feel
Hmm.
like they belong. And I feel like that might be similar to neurodiversity in terms of it's a umbrella term, and like you both said, what does that really mean, who does that really include, and how does that how if it's on TikTok, then I feel like it's been lampooned or something. So do you want to say more about that and maybe talk a little bit about your own experience as identifying as neurodivergent?
So one thing I think is important, when you brought up DEI, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Texas recently passed a new law that bans DEI from any college or university in the state. So University of Texas in Austin actually just laid off like 40 something people because they cannot have any job that relates to diversity, equity, or inclusion. And so it's great that we talk about neurodiversity, but I feel like that's the next thing on the chopping block when it comes to like when you put a spotlight on something that is supposed to be positive, just like DEI, then it becomes politicized and they, make it this horrible thing. And so for me and my experience, being a person who identifies as neurodivergent and having these diagnoses, I have, being that I work with this environment as well, I've had a great experience in the civilian side. I work in a school district. We talk about, what accommodations can be made and how we can, navigate neurodiversity with educators. But again, a lot of it is talk. But then when I was in the military, that's a different story. The military is like, we are who we are, and you fit in the way we need you to fit in. And that's what it is. There's not a lot of room for thinking differently or thinking outside of the box when you talk about military. But yeah, now corporate America, I'm gonna let you take that one, Bob. I don't know anything about it.
That's funny. Well, I'd like to put a pin on the whole thing that happened with Texas, and Florida did something similar too. But it was a very sad day for me this past week when, and as an alum, I'm very disappointed, extremely disappointed as well. But I'll put a pin on that for later. But to speak to your point about diversity and what does neurodiversity mean as far as the label and how it's treated within corporate, I would say it's somewhere in between what LaMyra was talking about from education and the military. I think it is a bit more open than the military, but not quite there where education is. I do think that I've had a conversation recently, and just reflecting on my own experience, is the concept of disclosure within a corporate environment and being able to feel comfortable with that self-disclosure and again, it goes back to like having resource groups that are that basically allow people a little bit more room to self-disclose and to ask for accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say that corporate America is completely there, but my personal opinion is that there's still a lot of work to be done within that.
Yeah, and then you get to the stigma of asking for accommodations or self-disclosing. Is that putting a target on me, or is that, that stigma is there, and now it's like, oh, she's just this lazy person and she just wants to use it as an excuse. And so there's a lot of that the personal part of it, where your past experience kind of dictates how you feel about it. Like, I've just become comfortable telling people, oh yes, I do have ADHD, or oh yes, I do have CPTSD, or I've just gotten to that space because of my experience in the military. It was something that was frowned upon. It was stigmatized. Going to behavioral health in the military is something that is like, oh, I have an appointment. Where you going? I just have an appointment. Just, you don't want to tell nobody where you're going, but I'm glad overall is becoming more acceptable and is becoming like, take care of yourself, self-care. But it hasn't always been that way, and it's not always that way in different areas.
Yeah, just a quick thing, two things actually. One is, for those of you who don't know, CPTSD stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. And there are different kinds of PTSD. There's the kind that soldiers experience when they're in war. And there's another kind, adverse childhood experiences. There is the shock kind of PTSD, like you're in a car crash and it's very traumatic. And then there's the sustained over time PTSD that may come from a number of different sources, and that's complex PTSD. So I just wanted to clarify that for people that aren't sure. And the other thing is mental health. And I'm wondering, now that you say that, do people equate neurodiversity with mental health by any chance? Do you think that? Because it just dawned on me that the stigma about going to see your psychiatrist or your therapist or having any kind of depression or any other situation that you need professional help for, it's starting to slowly, make its way into the accepted thing. People, say, oh, yeah, I've got a therapist. It's not that big of a
Mhm.
deal. But like you said a long time ago, and even in the military, it's not something you advertise. You have an appointment.
Yeah, I think it's because when you look at neurodiversity, it kind of links to that mental health piece, because when you live in the world that is very neurotypical and you're struggling, it can cause that anxiety and that depression and that, feeling like I'm not good enough. And so it can lead to some of those mental health concerns. And if you haven't dealt with like that self-acceptance piece. And so I kind of connected to, because one, I feel like everybody should have a therapist. Everybody has something that they need to,
It's
and if you don't have something, there's so many tools that everybody needs in order to navigate this life thing, because you're gonna come across hurdles. And so
mhm.
um, for me, when you're dealing with not fitting into the norm, then it kind of connects with a lot of those mental health kind of things that we look at.
I
You
love
know,
that. Bob, go ahead, and then I'm going to add, maybe I can bridge something that both of you told me in a previous conversation. Sorry, go ahead.
no problem, no problem. I wanted to tag on to what LaMyra was talking about, is that going back to the stigma, and I think the important thing is that I think people, I do think it's improving. I think maybe 10 years ago, people thought ADHD was like, oh, you there was this additional layer of stigma that I think is now becoming uh, less pronounced. It's becoming less with as time goes on, as people talk about it. And I think TikTok does have a little bit of I think there is some help there, as far as at least
Mm.
socializing that term and trying to get people to ask questions. But the downside is that I do think there's still the stigma that you're damaged, that you are, if you, especially if you're in corporate, that you can't do the job, that
Hmm.
that you're lesser than, that there's something wrong with you, and that can you fit in that role, and can you do the job.
Mhm.
And actually, I think there's a little bit of that concern that, um, and that's where it goes back to self-disclosure. And I think it also goes back to, you know, asking for accommodations. You can say things like, you know, I'm not great on email, boss, or coworker. If you need me right away, can you text me? So I don't necessarily have to self-disclose, but can I at least tell people like what my working style is? And so I think it's a little bit. I think that I might have preempted you a little bit, Jamie, but I, I do think that people have to be careful and feel safe to self-disclose, but also to recognize that they're not damaged, and
Hmm.
they can do the job. It may just mean they have to do a couple of things a little differently, but they're more than capable to do the job.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. The link I hear and that I wanted to make is A, self disclosure, and B, feeling like there's something wrong with you, you know, and there isn't anything wrong with you. And as I like to tell the listeners and viewers, we are all beloved children of a loving creator. And so whether you have ADHD or dyslexia or some other issue with your neural pathways and the way your neurons fire and the way you process information, because you're different doesn't make you less than. But I do feel like as soon as we bring difference into the equation, there's some kind of thing here about, well, you're different, that must mean something bad. But different is, and I wanted to say something LaMyra told me yesterday, which I just love: neurotypicality. And what does that even mean? And is there a thing? How is that defined? And so, could you please
Yeah,
tell us what you told me yesterday?
that's exactly what I was about to say. Is when we talk about, different is not a bad thing. That's where I was about to go when it comes to, we talk about, we kind of use neurodiversity and neurodivergence interchangeably when they're
Mm-hmm.
two different concepts. So neurotypicality is that this is what right looks like, or this is what normal is. And then divergent is anything that is outside of that. So when we talk about autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, OCD, all of these things are considered neurodivergent. Well, neurodiversity says let's delete those terms and let's just acknowledge that all of these differences are a part of the human experience. This is all a part of being human. There is no, what is neurotypical? Who is it? What does it look like? Where is it from? What is neurotypical? Am I neurotypical? Absolutely not. But at the same time, who can we point to in anybody who we've met ever in life and said, you know what? That's a picture of normal. That is that is what normal looks like. I haven't met them yet.
Either have I, and I hope I never do. That's too
And
boring.
so the thing about that is when we look at what we've designed as neurotypical, and what I was telling Jamie the other day is when we talk about neurotypical, we're like, what is that based on? Well, honestly, it's based on research, but before 1993, women and racial minorities and ethnic minorities were not required to be a part of any clinical research. And so neurotypical is based on white males. That's what it's based on. And so when we get after 1993 and we start doing more research for more people and we start seeing, oh, this is divergent, that's because we're adding women, and now we're adding Black people, and we're adding Hispanic people, and we're adding all of these different people. And it's like, oh, this is divergent. This is not what is typical. Instead of saying, oh, we haven't been including everybody, so let's trash the old stuff and create the new normal, we said, oh no, we're going to keep the normal and just call this divergent. And so by that, everybody is like, that is why neurodiversity is so important, because in the education field, I tell them, let's stop looking at general education versus special education, and let's just start educating kids, and stop trying to teach the label and teach the child. Because if I bring to you my 5-year-old and say, hey, she's a little bit shy, how are you going to respond differently if I bring her to you and say, hey, she has autism? What's the difference? Either way, there's a neurological difference in how she responds to things and how things connect in her brain. The only difference is the diagnosis. And so if we respect people's diversity and not their diagnoses, then we get a whole lot further.
Yeah. The one thing I've learned is, well, I've been diagnosed with ADD, and I have anxiety and a host of things, but I have felt I don't know what the word is. I have felt rejected by by you know the way I process information. I also have CPTSD, and so the way that my neurons have been used to firing and the way that I process information is slightly different. And as Bob and I were talking yesterday too about ADD, our inboxes are a nightmare. I can tell you that I have 6 email accounts and more than 10,000 emails in a couple of them. And I just can't, so if you haven't heard from me, it's probably why it's buried in my inbox somewhere, and I'm sorry. I'll get to it, but text me, please. But it's difficult sometimes, and I haven't always wanted to self-disclose, but I was in divinity school, and I had a final exam in my Old Testament class, and I'm one of those A students, overstudier, overachiever. And when I got to the exam, I forgot everything. I could not take the exam. I could not take it. I couldn't tell you what the Deuteronomy history was of the Old Testament if you paid me, even though I had 27 pages of notes on it. So I had an anxiety attack, and I could not take the exam. And luckily, I had very wonderful professors who gave me grace and allowed me to take the exams outside of class time when I wasn't so upset and nervous and, like I said, forgot everything. And after that, I had to get an accommodation. I can't sit and take a test without literally just going berserk. Not really, but, crazy. So I got permission to sit in a separate room and play music. So I played meditation music and I could take an exam just fine. So it was important. I had to disclose or I wouldn't have been able to function in that
Mhm.
particular situation.
And that's
So,
why I feel like
yeah.
those the system is broken,
Mm-hmm.
because if I come to you and I say I'm struggling to take, I know the material, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling to take the exam. Is there a different way that I can take the exam?
Mm-hmm.
Why does the system require me to prove it?
Right. Oh, yeah. I had to have signed letters and I had to go through the Office of
Right.
Disability.
Oh
It's like
gosh.
I have test anxiety, big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so if I come to you and say, hey, I'm not really good when it comes to email, can you just text me? Why do I have to prove to you that I struggle with this in order for you to respect that this is the way I operate best?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, the other thing that this calls for me too is that um, there are characteristics from neurotypical. Again, we'll just use that term, but especially when it comes to diagnosed ADHD, that there are some characteristics from neurotypicals that can sometimes fall over into ADHD. So, for example, someone may be overwhelmed. Someone may have the email problem too.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily, or they're not diagnosed, or they don't, they don't meet that qualification to be, to be identified as or at least diagnosed as ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But they just may have a thing about email. I don't, whatever that is, and
Yeah.
so,
I
or
totally
someone
get
who, someone who forgets their keys all the time. So that doesn't mean that there's, that they are
it.
labeled
Yeah.
or that they have this. But I think the more we talk about what this means,
Mm-hmm.
like what it, and how it manifests in different people too. Not everybody has, the impulsivity trait, or
Mm-hmm.
or a time blindness or anything like that. Not everybody even has that, but maybe
Mhm.
that feeds over into what called neurotypicals, and they may be able to, they may be able to relate. Yeah, I do that too.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, does
Yeah,
that mean?
and I agree because, like you said, when we see things like, uh, I have this particular thing that bothers me, I don't qualify, meet criteria under the DSM for ADHD or autism or whatever the thing is. I don't meet those criteria, but this is still a thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I still don't like speaking in front of people, or I still don't like this. So let's respect that. Like,
Right.
without like all of the things, because either way it goes, what's happening in your brain is happening in your brain. If
Mm-hmm.
my amygdala is firing off excessively, and then it's firing off excessively, whether you call it CPTSD or you call it autism or you call it anxiety, whatever you call it, this is happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so how can I address this, and how can I, accommodate for this thing that's happening in my brain?
Yeah.
This is a good time to talk about positive intelligence
Yes.
because that is so important when, for a lot of people who have experienced trauma, the amygdala, the lizard brain, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn part of our brain, everything's a tiger, right? So you learn how to survive. And then when you're no longer in that danger zone, your brain doesn't know the difference between a paper tiger and a real tiger. They're all real. And so the way positive intelligence helps us is, identifying 10 saboteurs, the judge and his 9 buddies, or her 9 buddies, depending on how you gender your judge. And mine is as big as the Lincoln Memorial. But I have learned through positive intelligence to recognize when these saboteurs, I call them ventriloquists because they sound like me. And then I realize those aren't me, those are just some kind of crazy voices that have entered into my head. And I have the opportunity to silence them anytime I want. And so maybe neurodiversity is great because our brains are plastic, right? Not the kind of plastic you throw in the ocean and pollute, but the kind that is plastic insofar as we can rewire, we can start thinking
Mhm.
differently. So we can say, okay, that's not true. And I don't have to go down that path anyway. We can head off the saboteurs at the junction and start paving a different path. And that's where the sage muscles come in. That's where empathy comes in, especially for ourselves, right? Instead of, oh gosh, I am such a, whatever, I can say, oh, that's okay. It's okay that you had anxiety. It's okay that you have 13,000 emails in your inbox. Luckily, some of them are junk. And it's okay that you reacted this way and not that way. And it's okay that you made this mistake. Pivot, explore other ways of doing it, navigate to a new situation, and then activate, take action. So there are different ways to get around it. And the other thing I want to say, because there are members of my family who are also maybe diagnosed with something that would qualify as neurodivergent, and they're bright, they're brilliant, right? Because people have had to learn how to deal with this thing, whatever it is, and succeed. And they're brilliant, they're creative, they're talented. And so for me, it's like, great that you're neurodivergent. You probably could be a rocket scientist.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
stop
like,
there.
welcome to the human experience, like let's not focus so much on the deficits all the time. Let's focus on the strengths, and let's
Mm-hmm.
rethink how we're looking at things. Because dyslexia might be to some like this deficient thing, and to others it might be, yes, I have dyslexia, so I think 3D and now I'm an amazing architect, so
Yes.
it's all about how we frame those things. And I like what
Mm-hmm.
you said as far as the brain, we can rewire things. I was literally just talking to my wife about this. My wife's a counselor, and we talk about these things all the time. And it's like, let's it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can
Mm-hmm.
respect people's differences and celebrate that diversity, and at the same time understand that we're not stuck in this thought process or this way of being, and to use that positive psychology to restructure and rewire some things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree. And uh, Jamie, I think I told you as well that I wish I had learned about positive psychology when I was in corporate, because I think it would have done just in the fact of just self care, of just being able to, and I say self care, but more just stop for 2 minutes, just
Mm-hmm.
stop, do an exercise, just breathe, meditate, whatever it is, for 2 minutes, do a PQ rep before going on to another meeting, before going on to a contentious work call or whatever that is, and don't feel you have to keep pressing through the anxiety or through the overwhelm. That's one part about PQ, about positive psychology, that I wish I'd known back, back when I was in corporate.
Oh, geez, I could have used it from the time I was 2. Shirzad, you're a little too late. Shirzad Shamin, who developed positive intelligence as a combination of mental fitness and emotional intelligence. And it has literally transformed my life to learn that I'm not my disease, I'm not my trauma, I'm not my ADHD, I'm just Jamie. And that was a revelation, believe it or not. 2 years ago, I had this revelation and it just changed the whole game for me. So um, I am now comfortable in my skin as Jamie and not someone with anxiety or someone with this or somebody with that. And
Mhm.
I'm hoping that this conversation can also be a game changer for other people.
Absolutely. Look, I've learned just in this conversation, I've learned a lot when it comes to positive psychology, and it's something that I have every intention on looking deeper into and really um, gaining more knowledge on, because it kind of sounds like it falls in the lines of the things that that I already talk about and look at and research, and the things my wife and I talk about all the time. And so I'm excited to go home and talk about this with her. So. But yeah,
Great,
I really appreciate it. It's really been eye-opening for me.
great, great. So do you have any last thoughts, Bob and LaMyra, before we hang up? Because we probably went over time. I don't even know. It doesn't
Um,
matter.
well, one, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and definitely appreciate your comments, and LaMyra, your comments as well. I think the key for me is just uh, understanding that, again, you're not, you may have a diagnosis, but you're not damaged, and it doesn't have to control. You can control it. You can control who you disclose to. You can control um, and mitigate a lot of the characteristics without feeling like to be ashamed or to have that I'm not good enough, and just really encouraging people to explore ways to mitigate so that it works with their career, their job, whatever, whether it's military or education or corporate world, how to make it work for them, and not ignore it, not be ashamed about it, and just make it work for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think my parting words will be recognizing that there is no normal. And so if there is no normal, that makes everybody different. And so being different is not a bad thing. It's different. That's what it is. And so just like we can put emphasis on our deficits, we can put even more emphasis on our strengths. And so to use your strengths to be successful, and you can do whatever you want, because we're all different. There's no normal.
Right. And so that's perfection is a word I hate too. You know, we all are we all are in some ways perfectionists. We all, apologize for mistakes, and my mantra is we are all perfectly imperfect human beings. And if we were all perfect, God would not have a job.
Welcome to the human experience.
Yeah, right. Welcome to the human experience. Right. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't days when we need to apologize or try to be a better person, but ultimately we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to forget to answer an email. I keep going back to email because Bob, you put that in my head, and now I need to really address that. But I really appreciate this conversation and listening to you two and meeting you. Thank you so much for your honesty and your vulnerability. And I'm hoping very many people see this or listen to this podcast and come away with some of your nuggets of wisdom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
likewise, it was great meeting you, LaMyra, and thanks, Jamie, for this.